Hello and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3 Iron, and today we are taking a look at inflation and money, currency sinks, and value inside Path of Exile. Now, as we're talking about currency and POE today, why we are doing it is because so many of you have had questions about inflation, about the value of specific items, about the ratios of prices and currency and how they fluctuate and why do they fluctuate inside the Path of Exile economy. So today we're doing a little macroeconomics 101 as we take a look at what is inflation, what are sinks, and how do they relate to one another, and how do they relate to the value of things within inside the various league structures of Path of Exile. So without further ado, what is inflation? You'll see me respond to comments often talking about inflation in Path of Exile, and frankly, not a lot of people understand or are aware of what inflation means in its classic textbook definitional sense. So we're going to take a look from Wikipedia. If you simply Google inflation. In economics, inflation is a sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. When the general price level rises, each unit of currency buys fewer and fewer services. Consequently, inflation reflects a reduction in the purchasing power per unit of money, a loss of real value in the medium of exchange and unit of account within the economy. This is why something during the first week of a given Path of Exile league might cost you 1 to 2 chaos. Later on in the league might cost 10 or 20 chaos. This is why, simply because of inflation. Also from Lawrence H. White, economists use the term inflation to denote an ongoing rise in the general level of prices quoted in units of money. The magnitude of inflation, the inflation rate, is usually reported as the annualized percentage growth of some broad index of money prices. With US dollar prices rising, a $1 bill buys less each year. Inflation thus means an ongoing fall in the overall purchasing power of the monetary unit. So that's inflation. What are currency sinks, otherwise known as gold sinks in MMOs or action RPGs like Path of Exile? Well, in PoE there are several forms of a currency sink, as almost every piece of currency has a specific use in addition to simply just being traded as a currency. Almost everything in Path of Exile has a currency sink by which it can exit the economy entirely. One example of this is that orbs of alchemy, of course, are used oftentimes to upgrade maps from a simple normal white item to a rare or yellow item. When you use the orb of alchemy on a map, that orb of alchemy no longer exists in the economy. It's gone. Poof, bye-bye, see ya, never coming back. It's gone. That is a sink. A currency sink is when currency exits the economy. So there are several different types of currency sinks. Chromatic orbs being one of them, as you're trying to color different sockets and you're leveling up, or maybe you have got a specific build that requires specific colors. As you're using chromatic orbs, they are leaving the economy. Alchemy orbs, as we talked about with maps and crafting items, as you use the alchemy orb, they leave the economy. Chaos orbs, as you spam chaos maybe on a map that has rolled something that you didn't want, or maybe as you are trying to craft something and get lucky using chaos orbs, as you craft using your chaos orbs, you are essentially throwing that money into an abyss, a currency sink by which it is leaving the economy. And of course, exalted orbs, which you can use to slam items or to craft specific prefixes and suffixes on items, or can hopefully craft specific prefixes and suffixes on items. Exalted orbs leave the economy as you slam and as you craft with them. Of course, Zana mods are a wonderful currency sink, because as every single league rotates and Zana mods are different, sometimes Zana mods are valued at a higher rate than others. And if a Zana mod is particularly popular, say Harbinger or Breach as particularly popular Zana mods, they often cost chaos in order to run. So this is one way by which chaos leaves the Path of Exile economy. Death is a currency sink in hardcore leagues. So if you're playing a character and you've got tons and tons of gear that you've spent a bunch of currency on, or if you're also simply carrying any currency on your person and you die in a hardcore league, all of that value in the items that your character was carrying, as well as all of that value of the currency that was in your character's present inventory, all of it leaves the economy. So these are examples by which money leaves the economy in Path of Exile, whereas inflation is, of course, whenever you or I interact with anything in Path of Exile that can have a drop of currency or a drop of an item. That is one way in which inflation occurs in Path of Exile, because that's how currency is added into the market. A currency sink is a way in which the same thing, the same currency, the same tradable item leaves the economy. So we've got entering the economy with inflation, and we've got leaving the economy with a currency sink. But what about the value? Here's a joke for you. What about the absence of value and meaning? Anyone? Haha, Shaper reference there. But what about value? What about real value and whether or not something actually holds real value? What does that mean? Well, in economics, a real value of a good or other entity has been adjusted for inflation, enabling comparison of quantities as if prices had not changed. So changes in real terms therefore exclude the price or the effect of inflation. In contrast with real value, a nominal value has not been adjusted for inflation, and so changes in nominal value reflect at least in part the effect of inflation. So in other words, for Path of Exile's purposes, when we're looking at an item at the beginning of the league versus an item at the end of the league, we see that the nominal value is going to be the effects of inflation upon that item. So maybe at the beginning of the league it was worth 1 chaos, and now at the end of the league it's valued at 10 chaos, right? That value, that nominal value, has changed from 1 to 10, but its relationship with the amount of chaos that has been generated in the total economy through inflation, through currency entering the economy. That, of course, is from Wikipedia. This is from the Econ Library. So the definition of value is that the nominal value of a good is its value in terms of money. The real value is its value in terms of some other good, service, or bundle of goods. I included this because there's some great examples here. First off, a nominal example, that CD that you might have on your desk or somewhere. Well, I guess many of you don't even know what CDs are. Wow, that's sad. Anyway, that CD costs $18. Japan's science and technology spending is about 3 trillion yen per year. That's the difference between a nominal value, where you are comparing the expenditure of Japan's science and technology spending versus the cost of a CD. That's value, nominally speaking. Real value, a year of college costs about the value of a Toyota Camry. Those tickets to go see Van Halen cost me 3 weeks worth of food. This is one way in which you are comparing the actual value of something by comparing not the going rate of something monetarily, but in comparison with other goods and services. So in Path of Exile, this would be like saying, rather than saying something is worth X number of chaos, you could say, well, I could buy a 6-link version of this unique that I'd like for my build, or I could buy this 6-link version of a rare, or I could pay for a carry service that will carry me through a particular boss. These are 3 different goods or services that are being exchanged, not simply currency. That establishes some real value for something. All right, moving on to the overview of inflation during a POE league with our homemade paint diagram. So as you look at the paint diagram, you can see that at the beginning of the league, at the very start of the league, day 1 of a league, there is no currency in the league. No one has anything. Everyone starts at 0. But as you look along the bottom, as time in a league progresses, there are, of course, more opportunities for currency to enter into the market. You see the green arrows indicate large spikes in the amount of currency that is available in the league. And those green spikes tend to happen, and they tend to trend up when there is a lack of currency sinks that remove currency from the league. So this is especially true, let's say, when Zana doesn't particularly have any highly sought after or highly valuable chaos sinks and mods available for maps. Another could be when there was a time at which unique rings used to widely vary in their prices simply because of their drop rates. And so the number of different rings and the different prices for different rings varied quite a bit. But what happened when there was a new currency sink that came into the game, i.e. the lore weave recipe, where you simply can trade 60 unique rings to a vendor and get a lore weave back, all of a sudden the prices for most unique rings stabilized across the board, where all of a sudden now they are simply worth 1/60th of whatever the value of a lore weave is, as opposed to each unique ring holding its unique value as well as unique price. Okay, so when there are these momentary occurrences, and they happen almost every league, this is one of the joys of playing Path of Exile, is that people discover different sinks, different ways to either gamble their currency, different ways to spend their currency. Maybe that's trying to 6-link something, or 6-socket and then 6-link something. That is a sink. Maybe it's when a streamer shows off that they only spent a few fusings to 6-link something. That one streamer may have only spent a few fusings to 6-link something, but then hundreds of other people go out and try to do the same thing. That becomes a currency sink, a way by which fusings exit the economy. When there's these dull periods of people not spending their currency or not using it for its craftable purpose, that's when inflation continues to trend upward as more and more currency enters the economy without leaving. So why are prices so different in Standard? Well, this helps explain it. When we've got temporary leagues, you can have these momentary spikes and these little general trend, of course, of going upwards with inflation, because, of course, more currency is always being made than is being spent. But there's a general trend of going upward, but you'll still have these peaks and valleys. Whereas in Standard, in general, there is simply an accrual of currency. The amount of currency that goes over into Standard every single league is literally everything everyone has found that has not been deleted from the previous league. Everything. So the amount of inflation that there is in Standard, and when you look at an item price in Standard versus an item price in League, you wonder, why is there such a massive price difference? Well, it's because the amount of currency that there is in Standard versus the amount of time that is played in Standard versus the amount of currency that is exiting the economy through currency sinks, simply because people aren't playing Standard or crafting in Standard to make that currency leave the economy. This is why prices are so different in Standard. So how do inflation, currency sinks, and value vary between softcore and hardcore? Because there are some differences depending on the league. Well, one of the ways is that all of the ways to generate currency, in other words, add money into the economy, are the same in both hardcore and softcore. There's no special ability or mechanic or act or map or zone by which in softcore it's accessible and hardcore it's inaccessible, or in hardcore it's accessible and in softcore it's inaccessible. Both of those are equal in terms of players' in-game mechanical ability to generate currency. Now, the difference, of course, is that all of the sinks are present except for one exception, and that is that in hardcore, death removes all of your currency and items from a hardcore league and sends them to the parent league, which is Standard. This exception explains a lot of the difference between the two economies. This simple one exception as an exit for economic currency and items that hold value. That one exception, that one currency sink, is the single biggest factor between hardcore and softcore economies. And of course, as POE players, we go, well, thanks, Iron. Duh. There's a difference between being able to die and retain your stuff on your character versus dying and losing all of your stuff on your character. That is a duh moment, and I get it. I get it. It sounds like it's an oversimplification, but this has a massive economic impact on these two leagues. Because the number of players is different in between each league, this impacts the amount of currency generated in a particular league. Leagues which have more players present will have higher amounts of inflation, simply because you've got more people adding currency into the economy. Fourthly, because the sinks in hardcore remove a greater amount of value than in softcore, there is less inflation, or there is closer to a real or true value of items. In other words, real here being used in comparison with nominal are definitions that we used earlier in the video. But Iron, what does this have to do with exalted orbs or any currency prices going up and down, or ratios or trading at all? Well, there's a couple of things here. So first off, supply and demand. As more currency becomes available, inflation, the demand to use that currency through currency sinks has to achieve a 1-to-1 ratio. Otherwise, there's an imbalance which distorts the price, the selling listing, from the value. So, if every single time someone in Path of Exile found a Chaos Orb, somebody else used a Chaos Orb, not traded, but used a Chaos Orb, then this would be a 1-to-1 ratio, and you would have a true value, a 100% true value with no inflation whatsoever. There'd be no imbalance in between the price from the value. Drop rates also affect this. Exalted orbs, for instance, can only enter the game through particular circumstances, like through cards, through vendor recipes, or through natural drops. But because exalted orbs have a different drop rate than chaos orbs, which can enter also through cards, through vendor recipes, and through natural drops, but because they have two different types of drop rates and drop restrictions on their prevalence in the economy, this means that they don't have a 1-to-1 ratio in their presence in the economy. One of them simply is more scarce than the other. So you've got supply and demand, and you've also got the frequency or the availability through drop rates. Both of those two factors affect the price. So continuing, what does this have to do with prices going up or down? Well, if you look at our chart here on the left-hand side of your screen, the entrance rate, if the entrance and exit rate of currency into the economy is the same, then they're interchangeable in value. So if there were just as many exalted orbs as there were chromatic orbs in the economy, and everyone used them at exactly the same rate, then they'd be interchangeable in value. However, if the entrance rate of a currency exceeds its exit rate, the currency loses value in comparison to other currencies. So when you're looking at the chart on the right-hand side, you can see that the exit rate and the entrance rate for exalted orbs on the right-hand side is quite different than chromatic orbs. Chromatic orbs, of course, are very, very prevalent. You can pick them up all the time, whether that's through naturally dropping occurrences of chromatic orbs or through the chromatic recipe. Whereas exalted orbs are much, much more rare in terms of their availability, and then therefore also much more rare in terms of their usage, as lots of people, everybody needs to recolor their gear. Not everybody needs to be able to slam an item, and not everybody is going to have the ability to even procure exalted orbs through their build or through their playtime. So these differences in their entrance rate and the exit rate is the difference between the currency's value and its particular price. So what's this mean for Chaos and Exalt prices? Well, a couple of things. So because Chaos orbs enter the economy more frequently and are in relative comparison exiting the economy less than Exalted orbs, the value of Exalted orbs continues to rise until such a time as when exalted orbs exit the market in relative similar rate as chaos orbs. So once they start to exit the economy at the same rate as chaos orbs, then you've got a true established value by which you're no longer going to have this inflation. Because Standard League exists and because everything migrates to Standard all the time, we've got this essential cycle of inflation that happens every couple of months where Standard gets this new influx of a bunch of money. Because player count fluctuates every day and steadily declines with the age of each league, there is a relative resting point of Exalted Orb value in relationship to Chaos, generally within the first 2 weeks. So the only reason why I say generally within the first 2 weeks is that it's within the first 2 weeks that you see the largest single shift in price, not in value, but in price, right? So the first person to find a first Exalted, maybe the first Exalted goes up for anywhere between 20 to 30 chaos during opening day, right? But then when you look at the difference and you say, well, you're 6 weeks into a league And 6 weeks into a league, an Exalted Orb is now worth 170 chaos. That's a big difference. Sure, it is a big difference. But the vast majority of that price difference actually happens over the first 2 weeks of the league, where the price of that Exalted Orb goes from 20 chaos all the way up to about 110 chaos, as we saw here in Betrayal League right away, almost instantly within the first few days played. But then, when you see, as time continues to extrapolate out, 110 chaos to 170 chaos isn't nearly as big of a percentage increase as from 20 chaos valued per Exalted Orb to 110. There's a much, much bigger gap that's going on there in terms of the price and in terms of the inflation into the economy, the number of things, the currency available inside the league. During a league, the single largest sink of any and all currency is through player bans or players ceasing to play the game. That's the single biggest sink in any game. Because of automated farming, which is a bannable offense, it's against the terms of service. You should not bot. Do not bot. If you bot and you get banned, you deserved it. Ban waves can mean large amounts of currency exit the economy. This number can fluctuate, representing as low or as high as 15 to 30% dip in price. And we've seen this as we've been doing videos about Bank of Exile here on the G3 channel throughout various leagues, throughout Incursion, throughout Delve, and of course through Betrayal. Whenever there is a large ban wave that goes out for players using automated bannable botting services or botting programs, we actually see the economy regresses a little bit. The value of Exalted Orbs change, and because of that, everything else in the economy changes because a massive amount of currency exits the economy. Now, what this number means here, 15 to 30%, it doesn't mean that 15 to 30% of all of the currency in the economy just left. That's not what it means. But it means that the inflation reduces, right, because of the number of pieces of currency that are leaving. It means that the value starts to actually get back towards a real value in its actual price. So the price adjusts towards where the actual currency is actually supposed to be valued at. Now, does that mean that that's a good thing? Does that mean that that's a bad thing? We're just talking economics here. We're not talking morality in terms of the value or price of Exalted Orbs to Chaos ratios. It's simply to say this is one of the factors as to why Chaos and Exalt ratios change so quickly in Path of Exile. It's because of these massive sinks. All right, continuing on. To sum up, what have we learned today? We've learned that inflation means currency entering into POE, and it enters at a higher rate than it exits. That's when you have inflation. A sink, what is a gold sink or what is a currency sink? It's mechanics by which currency leaves the economy. What's value? It's the ease of acquisition of a particular currency or item. Whatever one piece of currency is worth in relationship to another good or service. Real value. Price. Price is the expected rate at which a good, service, or currency can be exchanged. It's not necessarily the value, and price wildly fluctuates with inflation or with money sinks. Leagues. As a league ages, its currency and inflation thereby rises in comparison to its value. All right, so that's our summary on inflation. I hope that the great many of you that have got questions about economics, about POE, about Bank of Exile, I hope that you ask those questions. I really enjoy that you guys leave comments. I really enjoy the interactions and the discussion that we have here on the channel. So I hope if you've got questions about particular economic factors or things that you're observing or seeing in the economy, I hope that you ask. Hopefully, and most likely, some of your questions that you're asking, someone else also has as a question. So you'll not only be helping yourself by asking the question, you'll also be helping other members of the community who check out the channel. But then beyond that, hopefully you learn something. That's always our goal here on the channel, is for us to continually improve and hopefully learn. And I've learned a ton even in prepping for this video, even about some simple concepts like inflation, currency sinks, and value. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, stay tuned for more POE videos, and I hope that today is the day that a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.